Shalom. We are continuing our learning of Sefer Yeshayahu. We are doing Perek Chavsayin, and this is in the middle of a unit that, according to most Meforshim, is describing the very difficult period that is called Ikvasa de Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach, Chavlei Mashiach, the birth pains of Mashiach, the wars of Gog and Magog, a very difficult time, a time of suffering, a time of death, a time of Churban, but a time when Hashem will finally punish all of the nations of the world for all that they did against Am Yisrael. And eventually there will be a Geula, and in that Geula the Ummah Yisraelim are going to recognize Klal Yisrael's special role, and they too will come to believe in Hashem. And the Navi constantly refers to Bayomu, that day, but it's not a single day, but when that Zaman comes. And Pasuk Aleph says, Bayoimahu, on that great day of redemption, Yifgaid Hashem b'char bayakasha, v'agdeila v'achazaka. Hashem will remember with his hard sword, his great sword, his powerful sword. Hashem will destroy Livyasan Nachish Bariach, Vial Livyasan Nachish Akalasain, V'harag Esatanin Asher Biyam. So there are three things that are mentioned. Livyasan, according to our understanding, was a gigantic sea serpent, like a dragon of the sea, Livyasan. And there are two Livyasans here, or at least Livyasan is described in two ways. Maybe it's the same Livyasan. One is Nachash Bariach, like a giant snake that's a bolt, like a door bolt. That's a large bar. Bariach is like a bar. So that would suggest a Livyasan that is straight and unbendable. And the other Livyasan, or the other term for Livyasan, is Nachash Akalason. The Nachash that is all bent over like a snake that is has its own tail in its mouth. A coiled snake. So Livyasan is described as both a bariach, a bar, a kalason, and the Mefarshim give us these are different metaphors for different umos ha'olam. Rashi says the Nachash Bariach is Mitzrayim, and the Nachash HaKalason is Ashur. Others say it's referring to different aspects. The Bariach is brute strength, and the Akalason is deception and conniving and the like. But be it as it may, all of those Leviathans Hashem will destroy, as well as the Tanin, Asher Biyam, again, another type of serpent. And that's the Umos HaOlam. Ashur, Mitzrayim, Umos HaOlam. And Bayomahu, and when Mashiach comes, Kerem Chemer Anula, the nations will sing a song praising the Jews as a wonderful vineyard of wine. And now we continue with the song. And the song will be initially sung by Hashem, or in Hashem's words. Ani Hashem, I, the Almighty, Naitzra, I guard my vineyard. Lirigaim Ashkena, I will give it water frequently. Pen Yifgod Aleha Laila. Pen Yifgod Aleha, lest something happen to it. Laila V'yaim Etzrena. I will guard it day and night. It is my precious vineyard, like we say on Yom Kippur. Anu Karmecha, we are your vineyard. V'yata Naitrenu, and you are the one that guards us. Chema Ainli. There will come a time, Hashem says, where I will no longer have anger against the Jewish people. Kulo Rachamim. Mi yitneni shamir shayis b'milchama. Efsa ba atisena yochad. So the chema ainly is vis-a-vis Yisrael. Legabe, the nations of the world, if only I could make them like thistles and thorns that I could ignite, and they would burn up. Meaning Hashem will do that. I'm waiting for the time that they could be like Shomer V'Shayis. Oh, yechazek b'ma'uzi, yaseh shalom li, shalom yaseh li. May Hashem, so it's going back and forth. Hashem was talking, now Klal Yisrael is talking. Klal Yisrael is saying, yechazek b'ma'uzi, may we be strong in Hashem's strength. Yaseh shalom li, may He do peace for me. Shalom yaseh li, peace He will do for me. Meaning one was a request, may He do shalom, and the other is, I am certain He will. The next psukim are the beginning of the Haftarah of Parsha Shmos, so you might remember them. Haboim, days are coming. Yashresh Yaakov, that Yaakov, which represents the impoverished, decimated part of the Jewish people, shall sink roots in the ground that you won't be able to exile them. Yotzitz uparach Yisrael. Yisrael will blossom and flower. Umalu pnei tevel tenuva. And the whole earth will be filled with the wonderful produce of Am Yisrael. Again, the tenuva of Am Yisrael is lav dafka crops. It refers to Torah, mitzvahs, kedusha, ruchnius, spirituality. Now again, yeshayahu is going back and forth between this glorious vision of the future and all of the suffering that Am Yisrael is going through in his lifetime and that they will go through for many, many centuries. But Hashem says, at the end of the day, Hakamakas makeu hikohu, did God smite the Jewish people the way He smote those who smote the Jewish people? Meaning, what Hashem will do to the nations that made you suffer is much worse than what you suffered by them. Im keherek harugav horek, were the Jewish people killed in the way that the nations that killed them are going to be killed? In other words, what will happen to those who oppress you will be much worse than the oppression that you suffered from them. Bisasa'ah, in exact measure, saw is like a basket. Bishalcha, when she was sent out of Mitzrayim to Rivena, did God fight with her? In other words, all that you suffered in Mitzrayim was a midah keneged midah. Your averos required a certain response. And similarly, what happened to the Mitzrayim in Mitzrayim was a midah keneged midah. So b'sasa'ah, in exact measure, bishalcha, when she meaning Jewish people, b'sasa'ah, with an exact measure, bishalcha, when she was sent out of Mitzrayim, tirivena, did God fight with her? Again, with her either means the Egyptians or Am Yisrael. Haga, Barucha Akasha B'Yom Kadim. And God spoke with His harsh spirit on a very hot day, or a day of hot wind. Again, Rashi says, based on the Gemara, that this is a remez to Kriyas Yamsuf, that God blew a hot wind that split the sea. L'chein, b'zois yechupar avan Yaakov, and with the following will be a kapara for the sin of Yaakov. B'zeh kol pri, And the fruit of all of this suffering, the final fruit of all of the suffering, is hoser chataso, to take away his sin. So all of the yisurin that Hashem brought on you was to give you a kapara. The of everything was to purify you. That all of the stones of the altars that you built for Avodah Zarah should become like chalk stones that just collapse and break. Lo yakumu asherim v'chamanim, the Asherah trees for Avodah Zarah, the chamanim, the statues to worship the sun. Lo yakumu, should not stand up anymore. Ki ir bitsura badat, because when you do Avodah Zarah, your fortified city, speaking to Am Yisrael, shall become isolated. Noveh meshulach v'nezav kamidbar. The noveh, the pleasant dwelling place, mishulach, will be abandoned and forsaken like a desert. Sham yira egel v'sham yirbatz. Wild animals, or animals, will wander there. The calves will just be eating where your homes were, and they will lie down in them. V'chila seipah, and they will even consume all of the branches. Meaning, when you live a life where you don't do tshuva, all of this is going to happen, and indeed it did happen. The galus of the Aseres Hashvatim, the Churban Bayis Rishon, the Churban Bayis Sheni. Now it then continues the metaphor of the branches being eaten. Bivaish Ketzira Tisha Barna. When the harvest dries up, the trees will dry up, there'll be no fruit, there'll be no sap. So what's going to happen is, the branches will be broken. Women will simply come, break off these brittle branches, and use them for fire. Because there'll be no fruit. Now speaking to the Jewish people. For they are a people without understanding. In Al Kain, Lo Yerachamenu Oseyu, and that is why God will not have mercy on them, at least initially. That is why there'll be a Churban and a Galus. V'yitzrei Lo Yichunanu, and their Creator will not have compassion. So the pashtus of the psukim is that this is a reference to Am Yisrael itself, which fails to abandon its sinful ways. And that is the Pashut Pshat. However, some say, so some Mamari Chazal, that learn that these psukim are referring to the Umos HaOlam, and in particular, the verse that says, Bivosh Kitsira, when the harvest dries up, meaning when the tree branches dry up, women will come and break them and feed them into the fire. So the Gemara in Bava Basra has a drasha that we are not supposed to accept tzedakah from the goyim, at least from idol worshippers. Again, there are different nekudas about this. And the reason is we don't want to give Ovdei Avodah Zarah zechuyos. As the pasuk says, we want their harvest to dry up, get brittle, and be broken. And according to Chazal, the harvest is referring to tzedakah and ma'asim tovim, and we don't want to give them that zechus. So that's a drasha that Chazal have. Although in Pashut Pshat, this pasuk is talking about Am Yisrael. V'haya b'yomo, and on that day, Yachbed Hashem Mishibeilas Anar ad Nachal Mitzrayim. V'yatem tu lakatu li'achad achad b'nei Yisrael. So again, it's describing an imagery of the Jewish people being like kernels of grain on a stalk. And when you thresh grain, you beat the grain, or beat the stalk, so the kernels fall off. So it's describing a process. Hashem will bring you back. He will beat the stalk and the kernels will fall off, meaning there'll be tsaros. That actually means that one of the ways we come back to Eretz Yisrael, it's not the best way, is not because people on their own volition want to come, but the tsarais of the gullus are so great that they run away. So that's like threshing. Hashem will thresh you, and this will be all the way from the Euphrates until the Nile. V'yatem to look to li'echad echad b'nei Yisrael, and you will be gathered one by one by one to bring you back home. And the last pasuk is once again a very familiar pasuk. It is in the Rosh Hashanah Musaf as one of the psukim of Shofros. V'haya bayom ahu yitaka b'shayfer gadol. A loud, powerful shayfer will blow. Ubo ha'avdim b'eretz Ashur. And all of those Jews, this is really the 10 tribes, who we thought were destroyed or lost in the land of Assyria. V'hanidochim b'eretz Mitzrayim. And those Jews that were pushed, this is in Malchus Yehuda, after the Churban, they ran away to Mitzrayim. So this is a remez to all of the lost Jews. V'ishtachavu l'Hashem barak hakodesh. They will come back, and they will bow down to Hashem at the holy mountain, B'Yerushalayim. So again, we don't have the ability right now to fully understand this. We don't have the time either, but even if we had the time, these are deep and profound and complicated nevuas. And to me, it's a little confusing, because I see different pictures here, and it's not borrow to me how all the pictures work out. So I'll leave it with a kasha that I hope the listeners can think about, and if you have any auras, you can send them to me. This last verse expresses the idea that Geula, Mashiach, Kibbutz Goliath is going to bring everybody back. Even the neshamas that are lost, even the neshamas that are so far from Hashem. The Oivdim b'Eretz Ashur, the Nidachim b'Eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem will bring them back one by one by one by one. And yet, a little bit earlier, we actually kind of read a different vision. That the wars of Gog and Magog, there'll be many Jews that are going to die. And there'll only be Ma'at Mizar, only a few tzaddikim of Amunah, who will be Zeicha to experience the Geula. So which is it? Is it the concept that everybody comes back? Or is it the concept that many will be lost and only a remnant of the righteous will come back? Now the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva that Geula will only happen if Klal Yisrael does Tshuva. But the Rambam says the Eibishter promised that Klal Yisrael will do Tshuva b'Acharis Hayamim. So it could be that those who don't do Tshuva get destroyed. But on the other hand, there is a promise, Yidden will do Tshuva. So again, you still have to reconcile this. Are we dealing with an optimistic picture? Or are we dealing with a picture in which many, many will not survive and be Zeicha to experience Mashiach? Again, the Rambam tells us that we really can't understand the Messianic sequence. And he even tells us not to spend that much time trying to understand it, because the exact sequence does not bring us to Yiras Hashem or Avas Hashem. But we just have to believe there will be a Geula, there will be a Yeshua. And B'ezras Hashem, may we be Zeicha to that, B'mheira v'yameinu.